This is Brainy Podcasts with Soraya Shaw and Tracy Filler, inspiring creativity and innovation through evidenced neuroscience.
So what we've done, we've gone straight into this, whereas actually I'm now going to stop and introduce you because we're very lucky. We have the most amazing audio editor up in Scotland, Crystal, and we've all got to know each other now, so she knows how Tracy and I blabber on.
How
and
useless we are at being concise.
Yeah, so she cuts us up quite nicely and puts us all together, which is brilliant. So I'm good. So Miriam, Miriam is Miriam Boote. She's the MD of a independent agency down here in Brighton. Fiercely independent, very, very creative, great bunch of people. And she's the MD, and we're delighted to have her on our episode. Are we 5 now, Tracy? I think.
Well, we're giving up on titles and numbers now, aren't we? Because we're just going to let them roll, I think. But officially, this is series 2, episode 4, and we've entitled that The Human Self. Because this is all about you, this episode. We're looking at why the self is so important. And we're focusing on helping you, the human self, you, the leader, and you as a business, how you operate in that business, optimize creativity. So that we're still sticking with our lens of creativity and innovation, but we're adding in that extra word of ideation, where one person says something and then it brings out another idea in somebody else or you. And underpinning that, of course, with neuroscience evidence, because that's our main thread of connection. And today we're putting the you in capital letters and front and center, shining a light on the impact of that things like limiting beliefs and maybe early doors glass ceilings are having on how vocal you are with your ideas and how much you let them generate and come through. And we hope to sort of challenge your thinking and shift some mindsets around how you step forward with an idea next time and maybe shout it out, whereas perhaps you might have held it back. So that's what we hope it will change in you. But also think about the things that help stretch your problem-solving abilities and stretch yourself. We were talking about podcasts in their own right, sort of stretching understanding and allowing you to delve around things that you have an interest in. That's kind of what we're hoping we're going to do today.
Thank you. Very happy to be here.
Quite a big topic, really.
Oh, I think we'll probably talk for a long time on it. I think, whoever editors this have really got their work cut out. But I think we were talking before, we had our last episode we were recording was with a lady called Leanne in Australia, and she's all around psycho-safety and that we're a social brain, so we need to be working in environments where we feel we can be ourselves, we can bring ourselves to that. So it's kind of like the two parts. There's what you bring as a person and your own confidence and your own, as Tracy says, self-belief and your purpose. And then there's the social, you're part of that group, so you feel that you can say what you want to and you're not going to be shot down. And I think, Miriam, what's quite interesting in the world that you come from, the world of creative advertising, we know that there are some very, very strong characters and brilliant brains. Mm-hmm. So I think you're going to give us so much about how you work with, how as an MD do you balance all those people and make it work?
Yeah, I mean, I think, so I've been in the advertising, brand and creative industry for about 25 years now. And I think, the one thing that is constant is change and change around us. But in amongst that, I think the type of person that's drawn to a creative role and has a creative mindset, the thing that never stops astonishing me is just how different everyone is, and what that difference brings and just how special that is. And that's what makes me love what I do and love leading the agency and love sharing, the outputs of that thinking and diversity of way of thinking with our clients when we reach, something that's absolutely nailed their brief as well. But yeah, I think it's having a absolute kind of respect and understanding for that and the way that different people think. And I think it's a well kind of worn statement in some ways that, you might have your best ideas in the shower or whilst you're going out for a walk with the dog, or, it's not sitting down at a desk in front of someone. And I think for us, that's something really important to recognize, that not only people think in different ways, but they also think at different times too. Yeah. So whilst there's a kind of tendency to talk about work-life balance, I think within our industry, you just don't ever really stop because you have a curious mind. So that thinking could happen at other times of the day, in different situations, but bringing people together with that diversity of thinking at certain points and starting to craft and mold and push and perhaps go too far and then bring it back, but if needs be. That's what's really exciting. And I think it's bringing together the people and their thinking at the right time is when, we really start to get big gains in terms of planning and meeting, the brief of the client. So yeah, it's a never-changing, very interesting industry to work in. And yeah, that kind of understanding of different ways of working and different ways of thinking is what makes it brilliant, but also challenging at the same time.
Yeah.
So when we came up with this title, The Human Self, we were thinking of self-development as well as sort of that environmental encouragement that you've just described, but also self-awareness, which plays a big part in how people show up and play, and also self-belief. I'm just thinking how you encourage self-improvement in the workplace.
I think in terms of self-improvement, it's really understanding, the individual and, where they want to go, which sounds really simplistic, but again, kind of harking back to what I just said a moment ago about how everyone has different ways of working and different brains as well. There's different routes there as well. So I think the sense of self and actually understanding, your characteristics in that respect, can help develop individuals. And that's something that, I really look for carefully in the team. At the beginning of each year, I just have sort of 3 words that I want to latch onto for the year ahead, from a strategic internal point of view. And this year it's empowerment, change and growth. And, starting to frame that within the individuals within the business, like what can we do to empower them further? Do they feel empowered? If they don't, why don't they? Growth isn't just all about money for the agency. Obviously that helps, but also like individual growth. What does growth look like for that individual? And change too. How can they create change, and actually real palpable change too within the agency, for the work that we do, and obviously for the work that we do almost for our clients, and also on a wider how creativity can help the wider community. So I think framing it and then individualizing it for that particular person is the way that we help encourage a sense of self and also further development as well. And it brings a standardization to a fairly unstandardized business in terms of, I think advertising agencies are described as 60% chaos, and they are. You have to have chaos to have creativity. So I think having a framework to frame that chaos, progression and sense of self is really important.
I'm glad you've mentioned 3. Well, sorry, Soraya.
Sorry, I was just about to say that for me, that's absolute music to my ears, because, we're all about the diversity of brains. So the whole neurodiversity, not, no one brain is the same. So just hearing you talking about the individual and actually what their needs are and how you can bring out the best in them, I suppose, is what you're saying, and they grow and they develop, but also collectively what that means for you as an organization. So I think so. Sorry, I'm just kind of stating what you said and go from a neuroscience perspective. Brilliant.
Good.
Yeah, that's what I was going to raise actually, is because we were having another chat, and I can't quite remember in which context, but we were talking about our ability for our brain to hold information. So you often see things in chunks of 7 because people can typically remember 7 things. You've got 7 steps, that sort of structure. I love the fact you've said that you've got 3 words, because you were saying, Soraya, that it was probably closer to 3, not 7.
Yep, you can't.
That the brain can hold.
Can't hold 7 things. That whole multitasking thing is actually rubbish. because the brain needs the focus, basically, essentially. So all those myths about women, they're myths, I'm afraid. Yeah. Just to bang them over everyone's head.
Agreed. I know men some who are really good at multitasking, you know, who can do more than one thing well at the same time, you know, and then, you know, again, it depends, doesn't it? That kind of hyper focus for some people. Our strategy director, for example, he has to focus primarily on one thing at a time, and everyone knows that and they respect it and they let him get on with that. But he openly says, I cannot do more than one brief within a day. I can't work on two different things. You know, I can have a meeting, but that's it, done. So, and there is such a huge understanding, respect for that, which is great, you know, because it's him vocalizing how his brain works, and us understanding that if we want the ultimate value and from his brilliance, then that's what he needs to do, and people implement that as a result. So I think that's really healthy.
Really healthy.
I think we had a conversation with David Wilkinson, we were talking about, from the Oxford Review, and he was talking about how there are people who want to think and people who don't want to think, essentially. And it's kind of brought to mind for me divergent thinkers and convergent thinkers. So divergent thinkers are those who come up with ideas and are thinking all the time, and they can't sit still, and they make connections all the time. And then your strategy director, who, you know, they need that focus in their brain, but they're the kind of doers. And you start noticing in life, I think, and this is very simplistic, that there are those people who are always making connections and they can't stop doing it. And then those people who take those connections and do something with them, which I think is quite fascinating, actually.
It's really fascinating. And just whilst you were talking then, there are, you know, I've got names running through my head of people in the agency who are, you know, those two type of thinkers. And I mean, the power in recognizing that and supporting someone in the way that they think is where, you know, you get the best results, and people feel good and they're happy and they're healthy, and, you know, and the business as a result will be healthy too. So yeah, I'd like to explore more about that. Sounds very interesting.
Well, another lunch, I think. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, well, my head's dancing off into lots of different directions, and I don't quite know which question to ask you next, because I'm thinking about towards and away from focus as well. That's in my head. And some people are motivated to stop things from happening, and other people are motivated by achieving things and ambition of achieving a goal or setting big visions. And both of those are right as well. So I think what we're talking about here is really understanding those individual motivators in your team. As a leader, if you're responsible, however many direct reports you have, if you understand what makes them tick, understand what gets the best out of them, then you'll have a better idea of how to stretch them and challenge them and help them be an even better version of themselves. That's not a question. It's just sort of something that came into my head listening to that conversation.
But just building on that, Miriam, do you think by doing that, that makes your role more successful, easier to do in a way?
I think understanding individuals is absolutely key to what we do. I mean, our business is entirely based on people and their ideas and their thinking and their ability, and providing that platform where they feel that someone actually really does get them, or is on the way to understanding them, and understands what they need and how they work, and to a certain degree how they think, is so important. I often liken working within an agency, leading an agency, to like bringing in different people within an orchestra, you know, at the right time and at the right pace, and then together that collective kind of sound is when we're working at our best, and we make something beautiful and impactful and different and rousing and emotional and all those things. So I think you know, a conductor needs to understand, you know, the different roles within the orchestra, but not only that, but also style of playing and, like, you know, how to interact with them and things like that. So I think it's critical, and I think it's hard when you have someone that might either fight against that or perhaps isn't necessarily so open to sharing how they think best or how they work best. I mean, we have a policy at Designate, and I know that, you know, many agencies sort of do similar in the sort of brand appeal to kind of attract and retain talent, but it's genuinely based off a premise of, you know, work your day, and people work better at different times of the day too. So if you want to be at home you know, and do 6 a.m. till 9 a.m. and then go off to the gym or go and have a walk or do yoga, that's perfectly, you know, possible, as long as you don't have meetings. There's nothing reason that you have to be in the office for that. Then, you know, that's you know, perfectly well, supported and recognized, and you know, everyone can do that, and people have taken that up, which is great. And you know, I know that I'm better in the morning. Like in the afternoon, I get tired and my brain's not so great, and I actively say that to people, and I think the team respect that as well. They know that, you know, whether sometimes it's better to pick up a phone and just say 3 points rather than send a long email. That's better for me. Like I need to hear 3 things. So yeah, I think it's critical to getting the best out of people, and in a business which is based purely on people and ideas, that it's only in our best interests, and our best interest as a team, to do that and support it, and also look for other ways of improving it as well. Like nothing stands still, the river continues to flow. So, you know, if there are ways that we can support that further, then, you know, all eyes and ears to that.
That reminds me of something that Leanne gave as a bit of advice last time for leaders, to start their day slow.
Yeah.
Because it allows for that stuff to fill in and just start to settle down on where's my priority for the day, or you know, and just start to maybe come up with some ideas. Like you said, those best ideas come from the shower moments. Well, if you get into that habit of starting your day slow, it's amazing what can come and spill into your brain that can speed up the rest of the day for you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. I try and have a coffee quite quietly in the morning. I've got 2 young children, so it's always a little bit interesting. I wish it was slow sometimes, but yeah, I think quieter moments are important in our busy lives. There's so much noise everywhere, and it's noise from all the different, you know, we're constantly plugged into everything as well. And I think there's so much value sometimes in 15 minutes that can impact the rest of a course of a project or something like that. But it's actually identifying the need to have that 15 minutes, or allowing that thought flow for 15 minutes uninterrupted without answering a phone or looking at social media or getting on a train or whatever, you know. So yeah, I think quiet moments are important.
Yeah.
So how do you, that kind of leads me into thinking about, how do you look after the mental well-being with so many different brains? You know, and it strikes me as that it's something that everybody is kind of struggling with, and it's a huge subject, which I'm sure Tracy and I will talk about in the future. But what kind of things do you put in place? I mean, you've talked about the flexibility and the diversity of how people work and what they do, but are there any other things that you think are really important?
Yeah, I think opening up the conversation around mental health and mental well-being, and I think as an industry, I think advertising and creative agencies and media agencies, I'll put them in with that as well, it hasn't been great in the past. There's been, you know, real quite sort of male attitude in terms of, you know, just like pushing on, you know, not recognizing people's lives outside of work, the expectation to work late and paid, those sorts of things. It's changed massively. I know, Sarah, obviously your background within the industry as well, you know, from like I joined the industry in the sort of noughties, but you know, 90s previous to that as well. You know, it's so different now. And obviously the industry, you know, changes loads anyway, but yeah, from a mental health point of view, you can probably have conversations now that, you know, would have been unheard of sort of 10, 15 years ago. And that's reflected obviously in our clients as well. At Designate, we just welcome, you know, I listen out. Listening is so underrated, I think, but listen out for any. I heard an account director say the other day, she mentioned burnout. I was like, oh, I haven't heard you say that before. You know, let's talk about that. How are you feeling? You said you've experienced before. What's different? How can we change that? So I think more of awareness around it, and an open conversation. And I think also empowering the team a little bit in terms of some policy as well. So Rachel, our creative services director, who really won't mind me sharing this because I know she's very passionate about it, but she's suffered terribly with menopausal symptoms, and she actually with support from, you know, the board, we've sort of said, let's introduce a menopause policy. And I think she spoke to, HR consultant, made sure obviously, that it was correct in terms of what we were applying. But she did loads of research and she applied it and she announced it to the team and announced it on social media like LinkedIn as well. And she's had so many women get in touch with her as a result of that. So empowering people to make change for their better as well. And I sort of, I have a very open policy in terms of, if you want to do something, consider Designate as a startup. It's 30 years old, but let's consider it as a startup. What do you want to change? How can we make things better for you? And if you do need a day out because you're not feeling good, take it. Again, we're not going to get the best from our people if they're feeling terrible or they're having a depressive episode or they feel really low. So that plus, we provide private healthcare options as well, which we fund. So, and within that is the, brilliant mental health policy provision again, which probably 10 years ago wasn't as good. So I think it's all eyes on, but in a really natural space for people to talk about how they're feeling. And I quite often start meetings just saying like, how are you feeling? Like, we've got this big pitch at the moment, to run. So just like, how's everyone feeling? How are you feeling coming in today? Are you feeling stressed? Are you feeling excited? And I think that alone, just like a check-in, just regular check-ins with people. So it sounds quite informal, but I think actually that's what, like, mental health needs, that informality sometimes, and just to open up the conversation for it to not be a thing. It's part of our daily lives, like how you're feeling, and just understanding again just that everyone is different and there's different things going on. And of course, outside of Designate, everyone has their own lives, and again, understanding if there's something going on beyond the time that they spend with us as well. So yeah, I'd like to think it's fluid, it's open, and it's as informal and normalized as possible.
I love that example of your word empower in your 3 things, because what you're talking about there with the example of Rachel is ownership. Mm-hmm. And having the freedom to be able to go and make a change and implement something that is useful and will stand the test of time going forward for other people as well. But she's taken responsibility and full ownership to get that in place. Yeah. And I think that sits with that. And without that being there, the other side, it's all very well being empowered, but there also needs to mean that somebody does something with that.
Absolutely. And I think for her, it's such a passion project, and we've got lots of different provision and breakout areas, and make sure there's chilled water and fans and all these different things that Designate now, but it's almost provided a template for other businesses within the kind of Brighton creative industry, because I know that a few of our kind of other agencies within the area have actually taken what she's done, which is brilliant, because it's not just helping us, it's helping other people. But I think it hits all of those things, which is empowerment, growth, and change for her personally.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
And it's just amazing to see how proud she is. And again, I know that she's had 5 or 6 women individually and confidentially at the time reach out to her to talk to her about it, and she's speaking to them. And I think, she personally says, if I can help one other person that's been feeling the way that I have make a change, then that's good enough. And she's done that.
But I think that's right, because when you did, I found it really transformational when I read about it, because it had a wave effect. Mm-hmm. It's inspirational for other people, and again, as you say, it's very human. It's making it human, which mm-hmm. I think is where things have to become even more important with the future that we're looking at with AI and everything else that's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the key thing about that in particular, and obviously there's a lot around kind of menopausal policy and at the moment, and again, it's become normalized, it's become informal, it's become part of day-to-day conversation. But I think the key thing that Rachel put, which I really appreciate, was this isn't just a problem for women, it's for your brothers, your uncles, your nieces. There are, within our world, the amount of people that are going through menopause and how it affects everyone. It's not just a woman in their mid-40s to mid-50s problem. It's something that everyone needs to understand. So a good example of that.
And that's talking about a particular problem at a particular set of ages. There's a lot of discussion around the different motivators for, say, like perhaps the 20-year ago alpha style environment, and now today we've got the Gen Zers.
Yes.
They need different motivations. They have different needs. How do you, when we start to break this down, we realize just how much pressure there is on leaders right now. But how do you unleash creativity and innovation so that everybody is motivated to act on it, and that they're motivated to do so?
So our brand, we walk the walk in terms of, we talk to a lot of our client partners about having a brand purpose, which sits outside of, you know, making money or having, you know, a mission or, you know, commercial vision, etc. And our brand purpose is creative opportunity. And we're so passionate about getting new, younger, and particularly people, individuals that come perhaps from a socioeconomic background, which wouldn't necessarily be supported going into sort of creative arts world, involved at Designate. We do a lot of mentoring, lots of outreach, etc. And do you know, I think I did a mentoring, I've done actually 2 mentorships with the Creative Mentor Network, which is supported by Soho House in Brighton. And they did recruitment and they found individuals to come into the programme. I was blown away I had so many assumptions about that age group. And actually they're brilliant. They just don't actually have the access that they need at the moment, I think, due to education cuts in creative arts from 2013. The Education Reform Act there just pretty much stripped out a lot of creativity and those sort of subjects within state schools, which is really alarming. But although there's a different approach and there are different changing needs for a workplace, I think the core of passion, if you can really tap into that, and the passion of creativity and landing a position or supporting within a business that has an absolute belief in creativity and creative opportunity for them and what that represents, I don't see them as that different in many ways. And I know that in terms of like workplace and their expectations might be slightly different, but when it comes down to that core passion, drive, belief, I was blown away by some of the young people that I met and by some of the young people that we have coming into the agency as well. So there are times when I don't understand why I've got an account handler that won't just pick up the phone to speak to someone when it comes to things like that. But then there's also like an understanding of, you know, I ask in that situation, for each client that you have, what's their preferred way of communicating? So, like, you know, to step back from, you know, perhaps not wanting to make that phone call, what do they prefer? If they would prefer to be communicated via email or WhatsApp, for example, you know, a message, then fine. But if not, just push yourself out of the comfort zone and make the phone call. And I think once those, you know, it's kind of personalizing that a little bit as well. So I think it's identifying the differences and then advising if there needs to be a change. And if there doesn't, just a recognition and respect for they are a different generation. But again, coming back to the core of what it is, like working within creative industry and that passion, that is the one constant. And to me, that's the most important thing. And if they could pick up the phone a bit more as well, that'd be great.
Yeah. But I think I'm not surprised. I mean, when I was a young account handler, I hated using the phone. I used to have to stand up to make a call because it made me feel kind of, I don't know, stronger and bolder. But it's really interesting what you talk about education, because this is something that Tracy, I feel quite passionately about, how much cuts there be made to education around the whole creativity and critical thinking. And when we were talking to David about it, he was talking about a piece of research that looked at youngsters and I'm sorry, I don't mean that word derogatory, coming into, well, I think it was universities, and the only group that could think critically were the ones that had done baccalaureates, because they'd been taught to think critically. And you know, the UK is actually really behind in this, on that whole creativity, critical thinking on the agenda, and it's really quite frightening.
It really is. I mean, I think the thing that I find really difficult is the switch to much more exams than coursework, because a creative mind, you need to craft and develop and refine over time. And, you know, sitting down in a confined space, you know, just thinking about the people that I described earlier on when we were talking about, you know, doing things at different times of the day and doing things in different environments, that's hellish to someone's brain that works that way. Like, to sit down and suddenly regurgitate everything that you've kind of parrot learned anyway. It's not, there's not the depth, there's not the connectivity of that thinking. But actually having a project, a creative project, which requires refinement, it's not going to be right first time. And I think there's also that the critical thinking, like sometimes it's okay to fail. And I think like there's no ability to fail in an exam situation or to go again or to start again as well. So yeah, I mean, I also feel really, really passionately about the stripping out of creativity, critical thinking, innovation within our curriculum. I'm appalled at it, to be honest. And again, that's impacting the young people, which is why we're so passionate about trying to get additional creative opportunities for an industry which is the best creative industries in the world, is within the UK. And then that it also generates an awful lot of money. It contributes billions of pounds to the economy as well. But for it to be demeaned is a strong word, but I'm going to use it, demeaned to the level within education where it's not seen as an option, or perhaps within families in lower socioeconomic groups, it's not seen as a safe bet for financial stability, which obviously, if you come from, a background where perhaps, it's not so financially stable, of course, you're going to choose other routes. So yeah, it's alarming. And I hope that reform.
Yeah, so there's we mentioned it in our first series, but PISA 2022, we want to take more of a look at, don't we? Have you heard of that at all, Miriam?
I haven't, no.
Yeah, worth having a look at it. There's 27, I think there's 27 countries that have signed up. We're not one of them. The UK is not one of them. And it's a creative thinking assessment. I've just brought it up online. It says it measures students' capacity to engage productively in the generation, evaluation, and improvement of ideas that can result in original and effective solutions, advances in knowledge, and impactful expressions of imagination. Why would we not want to do that?
And I think, do you know what, that's already starting to happen, like the lack of understanding and knowledge in that space. And it is concerning. It's quite interesting. A client, very senior client within financial services, who exited a business and is now, I think, looking to do a startup, and is going around, speaking to various different people, perhaps trying to raise some funds, and saw him in the evening of a day doing this in London, and he's like, he said, it's astonishing. He said, all day there's been absolutely no kind of example of creative thinking with any of these people that I've met. Like, there's just none. It doesn't exist. I can't see it in business. It's like, I'm worried. He said, what you do is so valuable, and there's a lot of opportunity because it doesn't seem to exist anywhere else. But he was astonished at some of the conversations he'd had. And yeah, I think there is real evidence of that critical creative thinking, that development, all of the things that you just described. So yeah, it does need to be addressed, and quite quickly.
And interestingly, it's why we drove to stay on the topic of creativity and innovation, because we realized it's much bigger than that. The critical thinking is the pathway, but ultimately it's about who's making decisions and judgments in your business, and on what basis and what thinking. Mm-hmm. And if we're not able to develop that part of our brain and have more people doing that in our organization, we are starting to make choices, decisions, direction in an organization that is that's such narrow field. Yeah. It's beyond dangerous. It's going to be the demise of the business.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, this is partly really why we're doing what we're doing, because I have a saying that I'm not allowed to say.
You can. I said it nicer then.
Go on, say it. Okay. I really believe businesses don't innovate, they die. The world that we're living in at the moment, I call it a tumble dryer world. It's so fast. You've got to be so agile, so flexible, always building, developing, being out there. If you haven't got that brain power, if you haven't got that discipline of how to do it and the confidence to do it, then actually companies are just going to disappear, And I mean, we were coming in conversation, I can't remember who it was with now, about AI and how lazy people are becoming. And Tracy, you were saying now that you kind of despair because you're starting to see words that you go, oh my God, that's an AI word. I can't.
Yeah, that was with David.
David, yeah.
And I think I'm not alone, but we get alerted now to, that's not written by them. That's been produced. That's been produced by chat. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And it's fine. We talked about it being okay as a starting point, but if your brain isn't ideating or using it as a basis of your own thoughts, then it's not going to be authentic.
Yeah.
No, I think probably every meeting that I have at the moment, AI is mentioned. It's kind of almost like a bingo, like ding, it's come up. And I think yeah, like 10, probably 15 years ago, if you really understood digital within marketing, you get jettisoned up to the board at, some big corporates. Then it was mobile, and now it's AI. And it's on the agenda of every conference, everyone's speaking about it. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot of questions around, will AI take over creativity? I was having this conversation yesterday afternoon, actually, and I think there are so many problems with AI. I mean, AI's existed for a long time anyway. It's just now obviously got more machine learning, so it's been put into this a few specific platforms which can generate and from our perspective, it can aid certain things, it can speed certain things up, but it always needs to have that human element, that human thinking. I just don't think that you'll get that connectivity, that human element of like emotion or art or something that makes you fall in love with something because it's generated by AI. And I also have, there's a huge white male bias on AI because most of the content on the internet, I think, it's 80% biased towards men as well. So how does that work from a diversity and inclusion perspective? There are many, many issues that we're sleepwalking into. I do believe that change is coming, and that I think the power of creativity and the value of creativity will come further back in terms of prominence as well. I don't think we're on a single track, which I know a lot of other people potentially might do. But yeah, we're allowing some things to happen which shouldn't be happening. And I don't think we're stopping and taking taking stock enough at the moment. It's like, oh, this is exciting and I can do this. And yeah, it's very much at the top of every agenda, but at what cost? That's my concern.
We're quite a fan. I'm quite a fan of AI, but in our first series, we spoke with Ross Stevenson, who works in that space all the time, and he said that the future is definitely human. So you'll be pleased to know that.
Yeah.
And he also said that how he sees AI being integrated into day-to-day organizations is that it will start to strip away some of those mundane and repetitive tasks, which should, if leaders get it right, give people the space to think, to ideate, to be creative, to improve, to build upon whatever it is that their circumstances or their job function requires. It will give them the space to do that. And that's how I like to look at technological advancement.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, that is our position as well, allowing yourself more time. We started off talking about the luxury of time and the value of time, and, how using your time effectively is so important in our busy lives at the moment. And I absolutely agree. And to that degree, that's how we use AI at Designate, image searches, or, for example, looking for different words to describe something. It's useful. It's like a sounding board. Almost you can use it as like another person in the room, as long as you always apply those, this is AI and all those biases. It always has to have that subtext, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And that human interpretation as well.
I think where we came out is that AI is all about information. It's not about experience. As you say, it can't ideate because it hasn't experienced anything. It has no emotion, but also it can't innovate. It doesn't know what innovation is because it can't make all those connections. And if you think about our brains, the better questions you ask, the more curious you are, the more that you live in the world and you do things, your brain is making all those rich connections all the time, which is where new thinking comes from, new ideas come from, new ways of looking at the world. Our whole perspective shifts, and it can't do that. It's an information tool.
And it's only the information that it has, I think, versus we're having an AI consultant coming in to actually speak about, is almost using us as a blueprint, like how can we improve creative agencies' efficiencies and, outputs using AI. And yeah, the difference between obviously the human brain versus AI brain in inverted commas, it's vast. And obviously it's only what's available as well. So it's only what's on the internet. And again, that comes back to bias, where's that source coming from? And, the terrifying you know, I know that Dove's doing a brilliant campaign at the moment where they're trying to hack into the algorithms around what a perfect woman looks like, and actually putting out images of women who aren't in their 20s with pink hair, with a nose ring and a beautiful sculpted face, to try and to change that, to beat the bots. And I think we're going to see more of that, but it has to happen because it's just not representative at the moment. And if we're allowing decisions to be made based on that bias, then that's where I feel uncomfortable, and I think we need to stop in amongst which is great.
I know from a neuroscience perspective, when I go in to check things, it gets it wrong. It doesn't get it. It's not understanding. It's not making those connections, because it's, you know, it's a vast kind of subject, and it's always making mistakes, which is terrifying.
Well, that's what David was saying, wasn't it? He said it's not algorithms, it's not Google search in a different domain, it's a language system. So it's only working with sets of language. And that quite shocked me. So it is in its own right limited.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know whether you've put your name into ChatGPT to see what.
No.
Okay, yeah. Because I think that's interesting in itself, and talking about sense of self.
I want to do that right now, but I won't. I'll stay disciplined.
You might not want it published online. Who knows? But yeah, it's what's in the public domain. But yeah, I mean, I have, and it comes back with a description of me and my job and some of the things that I've done within my career. But because I haven't published about my children and what I like and what sort of person I am and what's my, you know, my favorite artist, I think you don't get that. There's not the richness of depth of human experience within that. So I think that's a really good example of that's the limitation of AI. If that's all that you can get on me, it doesn't really say a huge amount about who I am as a person. It just describes what I do. And for me, that's like sums up.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. That sort of brings us back to us talking about the human self, because we've talked a lot about what do you do as the leader to encourage people to grow. But actually, there is a responsibility on the human themselves to keep growing. I think one of the things that we're just listening to that last discussion is about being curious. Stay curious, be curious, expand your mind by expanding your understanding, keep asking questions, go to people that can give you different perspectives, and keep reaching your own conclusions and trying things. As you rightly said at the beginning, partway through, I think you said about we don't allow people to fail.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
exactly. And we only
said it in the context of an exam, but actually in the workplace, it's so much about getting it right to save time and get it out to the client, that actually trying it is one of the biggest methods we have for innovation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tracy, why don't you ask Miriam who her jester is in the company?
Do we need to explain what that is?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. So David told this wonderful story that the court jester was protected. Back in the day, in the medieval times, he wasn't there to entertain. He was there to hold a mirror up to royalty to say, this is what's going on. It's crazy. If you like, it was like our left field comedy, that where we joke about the reality of the world that we're living in. That's what the court jester does. And so Soraya and I have decided this is kind of the role we play. We go into organizations and we kind of hold the mirror up to say, you're doing it like that? That's crazy. Yeah. Let's have a look at another way. So that's what she means by the court jester. And who might that be in your company?
Yeah.
Soraya, you probably know my answer to this, actually.
I do, I think.
It will be Adam, who's the founder of Designate. Yeah, very much so. And I think that description of holding the mirror up to say, and having that accessibility as well, to hold the mirror up and say, you're really doing this. Are you sure about this? Yeah, absolutely. Adam, who is still very much involved in the business 31 years after starting it. So yeah, he'll be the jester.
Yeah. There's an honesty to it, isn't there? I mean, Adam is a very honest person. And I think that's where we came out, Tracy. It's that a lot of companies don't have any honesty in them, because, and that comes back to the whole psychosocial safety that we were talking about with Leanne. People are always looking over their shoulder. They're always worried about what's going to happen. And, you know, they don't dare speak up. So actually, and then what you were saying, Tracy, then you've got companies just rolling down the same path, making the same mistakes. And because no one's speaking up, the leader thinks it's all okay. And, you know, it all just turns into the stuff that we all know about. But actually being able to have that lens, that perspective, that mirror. And as you were saying last time, Tracy, it's not having non-exec directors, because they're around that table as well.
They just join the payroll.
Yeah. It's just, where's that person who's got the honesty, who's got the courage, who's brave?
Yeah, it's funny because I've just come from this morning where I've been running a session on assertiveness and influence. And, I say that it's all about saying what you actually mean, not what you sort of mean. And I think there's a lot of that going on in business for fear of, there's the political landscape of how they're set up. And we've talked about unbossing as well recently, where people have the freedom to do things the way they want to do them without being questioned, because they're trusted for their expertise and their skills. So I think all these things are just very complex and clouding what's okay and what's not okay when it comes to, I lost my way a little bit, but I think hopefully I've made some sense with mentioning about what people say, what they really mean, what they sort of say, and how clouded that can make direction and the lack of clarity that comes from that for the people that are supposed to be following.
Yeah, and I actually think that there's a lot, I think particularly senior clients, we try and spend time out of the boardroom with, C-suite clients particularly, but I think they really value that transparency, that directness, that quick questioning, that challenge, and hearing it more and more, we want you to challenge us, like, we trust your expertise. So yeah, I think it's critical, and carrying out sort of brand strategy workshops and things like that, where you have the whole team together. We always say, beware of the hippo, which is the highest paid, most important person in the room. Do not let that person start to direct conversation, because actually most times we find that during a brand strategy process, which is always quite humbling because brands kind of do give you the keys to their house to go and have a rummage around and see what you find, the most insightful thing or insight comes from, people that work in the call center or somewhere else within the business, but they just don't get the opportunity to surface very often. And sometimes those things are actually really innovative thinking, or because they've thought this thought, but they haven't had the opportunity to say it whilst dealing on the day-to-day basis with the end user customer. And I think making sure that people are debossed, I love that, it's a really great term, in certain situations, and go into listening mode is so important, because it's respecting people's expertise, talent, and what they do on the day-to-day as well.
What was your hippo? I love that. I think our listeners are like that. Highest
paid, most important person in the room. Hippo. And you would have seen it so many times as well, but I think that's changing, listening. You can read the dynamic in a room when you walk into it, can't you? You know whether people are really going to speak up or not. And, to try and elicit that response is not easy if that is in place. And I think being told, you shut up, listen, sit in the corner, here's your team, that's why everyone's here today, that's why you're investing X in this, is always a really, really useful and important thing to set out at the start of any session like that.
Some clients do it really well. I remember in the past where the senior person would speak, and then they'd speak to the most junior one and say, what do you think? And of course they said exactly what the boss had said. They wouldn't tell the truth, it's just playing games. But I was just thinking, when we come on to, you're talking about clients and different, you work with so many different organizations and C-suite and different people. What do you think we can pass on, because our big thing was that there are so many people who fear the word creativity. It's something that's I've worked with clients and I'll say, bring the word up, and they're like, oh, I'm not creative, don't be silly, I can't do that. And I can't, because people think it's about pictures or whatever it is, that it's about, joining some dots up and seeing some patterns.
Yeah.
So what kind of encouragement do you give to your clients, or would you give to organizations that really, really need this stuff? Otherwise, they're not going to be around very long. How can they help create that environment where people can join up those dots and see things differently?
I think we help stimulate that. And I think we always say that we work in partnership with our clients as well. It's not us telling, or, we do a lot of asking, and then we work in partnership together, and take them through that sort of, creative ideation process as well. So it becomes something that they not only love, but becomes part of, you know, their story for the next chapter of their business or repositioning or whatever it will be. But also just really encouraging clients to get out of that kind of mentality, boardroom mentality, of just looking down at spreadsheets. And, you know, I think having, you know, done a couple of NED sessions or guest sessions, you know, going around a table with people reporting on spreadsheets, there's zero creativity or innovation within that. And I think, again, that's changing, but just understanding that there is a more creative process or a more creative way of doing that as well, like looking at the business. And we've had feedback from clients saying, you've made me look at my brand in a totally different way, which I didn't expect to. Like, you've redefined what it means to me. And I think over time, they not only appreciate it, but, you know, proudly talk about what that thing is that this creative process has given them, that, you know, this redefinition or shining light on a different part of it, or looking at it in a completely different way. And that, you know, becomes part of the fabric of the business and the culture and everything. And obviously when you get to that stage, then that's fantastic, because you've really changed things. And I think everybody is inherently creative in some capacity. I mean, we work with a law firm, they're like, oh, we don't know how you do this, like, you're this side of the brain and we're that side of the brain. I'm just like, nonsense. Like, look at your incredible culture that you've built. You've got this almost punk attitude in this law firm that's doing different things. That in itself is creative. You're doing something different. You've got energy and passion, and you brought everyone along on it. And that's not based on spreadsheets and kind of, you know, the latest case that you've won. It's what you've built. So I think I do think people are a bit scared of creativity, because it's not, there isn't a neat definition for what that could be. And actually we make creative decisions all the time in our lives. And so I guess it's just bringing that to life in a business sense, and giving them the confidence and permission to a certain extent. And like, I'm a creative thinker. This is part of what we're doing, and I believe it, and I can tell everyone else about it, that this is our mission now.
Wow.
I know, there's not a lot to say.
There's so much. Tracy, I'm going to hand over to you.
Oh, well, no, I just started writing down lots of words that came to my head when you were talking, because I could have just forgotten that I was actually recording and was supposed to be part of the conversation. But I was thinking about it back to the human self and our responsibility to the listeners, looking at them and what they can do. And so loads of things came from there. Question we talked about already. Collaborate. Actually, you talked about making connections, but be there. And that brought me into listen. Be there to listen and observe, and also reflect. What's good, what's not, what can I do differently, what will I do better next time, what will I carry on doing, because I've realized I'm quite good at that. Had a guy on this course today, and he said, we were talking about the how high body language and nonverbal communication and cues are in face-to-face communication, and how words represent such a little part of communication. And he said, but I realized, he said, I focus on the words. I said, then you're a very special person, and that's your very special gift. And I want you to take that away, because that is somebody that can literally listen to what's being said, not what's sort of being said with everything else sitting around it and noise. Yeah. So observe and listen to that level is incredibly skillful. And I loved your phrase about we make creative decisions every day. And this is why we've realized it's such an important part of an organization and individuals, and the way leaders lead others. Because if you are encouraging people to come forward with an idea, even if it's ridiculous, if you are allowing someone to just have a go and see what happens. If you are asking the person that's on the floor what their opinion is, and know that it's okay for them to say something different, you're leading them well. All those things we've just said. And those other two words were the permission to do that. And the last word I wrote down was about identity, because we are adapting. You said about Chat GPT, put your name in, which I'm so going to do after this. It isn't the whole thing, is it? It's just what's out there, and that takes me to Chahara's window and the bit that we know everyone sees, and then there's the bit of us that very few people see, and the bit that we don't know because it's not been explored yet. That's kind of what we're tapping into here. And we can shift our identity, and that's part of self-development and part of that human self growing. So for me, that's what I got out of listening to that. It's quite a lot to unpack.
I think I'm just going to jump in there. The word that years ago, when I first came down to Brighton, I used to run these workshops all around entrepreneurship, about getting people internally to have that permission to be entrepreneurial. And I think that's something that we don't really talk about anymore, but I think it's a really valuable way to start encouraging people that if you're being entrepreneurial, we're giving you permission to do it, what would you do differently?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think something else that I think is culturally quite important at the moment, and something that we really encourage at Designate, is disagreement as well. What we don't need to have to agree on everything, and actually, having a safe space to disagree is so important, where people can genuinely express their feelings. And I am worried societally that we are so polarized now, and that everyone's kind of sitting into kind of niches, and everyone's very cross in their little interest groups, or whatever it is, and no one's listening anymore. And I think just actually coming together, the middle ground as a term to me sounds really dull and really boring, and I don't think I'd ever want to occupy the middle ground. I think we need to establish a middle ground now, where people can come from these polarized opposites and meet in the middle ground. And that middle ground is a safe space to disagree, but in a respectful way, and understand that everyone comes with different backgrounds and beliefs and needs and wants and personalities, and that everyone's brain is different as well, and that we approach everything differently, but to have the debate. And that's what I feel societally we're not doing enough of, and having a place where you can air your opinions, but that they're listened to and debated, and then there is an outcome from that as well. So on a much smaller scale, whilst trying to change the world, within Designate, having a safe space where you don't have to agree. Everyone, we all, beyond how we work stylistically or anything like that, everyone arrives with so many, a different backpack of life, don't they? So that is critically important. And and we should be able to have debate, and sometimes it might get a bit heated, but that is passion, and passion is important, and passion is the core of creativity. So yeah, that's critically important, I think, for us. And that again gets the best conversations and the best results as well. And we try and encourage it with clients too,
I agree with that. And that's kind of what I meant by collaboration. I think it's about having a voice without shouting out other people's voices as well, which is what you're talking about. And I always say to people, if you've got an idea, don't go and ask somebody that you kind of think has a similar mind or look at it the same way. Go and find someone that looks at it the opposite way, so that you can come together, because together you're probably going to come up with a much better idea or solution.
Yeah.
And I think this is what Leanne was, with the psychological safety, whatever you want to call it, and the two terms are slightly different, but it is about feeling in that environment where you're recognized, you're seen, you're respected, you're listened to, and you can voice differences. If we were all, as you say, everyone's brain's different, we all bring a different, I like that, life backpack thus. I think that's fascinating. And it's about respecting that. And that's where the richness comes from. And you're right, in the world today, we seem to have lost it.
Yeah. And I think it's also like, thinking about the backpacks as well. It's kind of, if you want to work with someone, you want to get a really good partnership and result. And this is the strength of the depth of a lot of client relationships that, we have and have maintained over a lot of years. Understanding what they do come to the table with, and more beyond what their job role is and what the objective is. It's kind of, what were you doing 10 years ago, and what was your childhood like? It's important, because obviously you can draw from that, but you can also understand. And I think that human understanding, again, that's where the collaboration is much more powerful if you really understand that person. It's not always possible, obviously, and I think, unfortunately, virtually, I think we've lost a lot of that, which is why I always try and encourage as much face-to-face as possible with our clients, just to get that depth of understanding, and the body language reads that you get in the room, and the dynamic and all those things. But actually, really getting to know someone as well can really help that too.
Well, that's become, the brain is a social brain, isn't it? And we're all about relationships. It's that's what we are as humans. That's what's so important.
Yeah.
That's why long lunches, I used to love them, because you really got to know everybody. But you're not allowed to do that anymore.
Oh, I don't know, Sarah.
Oh, yeah.
Lunches definitely still do happen. Yeah, which it's important. It's really important.
Yeah.
I didn't work in creative. I don't know what you're talking about.
I think you'd be like a duck to water.
Do you know what? I come from the recruitment industry, and when I first started out, we used to have to finish payroll used to be done on a Friday with a bottle of wine on your desk.
I think there used to be drinks trolleys that used to go around. Didn't they, like tinkling along on a Friday afternoon?
No,
those
that
were
makes
the days.
Sense. But that brings us on to there were two questions that we wanted to ask all our guests. So the first question is, what do you do to create joy and laughter amongst your team? And the second question is, what's your leadership secret?
Joy and laughter. I think that comes from a shared energy, and I think really, like having all of the brilliant people that work at Designate together, when we're all together and we're doing what we do best, which is debating a problem, chewing something over, remarking on something that's happening culturally, socially, that energy is joy and laughter comes from that. And I think having a brilliant set of people, and the team at Designate at the moment, they are fantastic, and that's that collective energy that we have together, which is why I always describe what we do as kind of falling in love in some ways. Like, people have to fall in love with the person they're seeing in front of them from the agency. They have to fall in love with the output as well, and then fall in love with the agency, and like having that kind of energy which creates, to a certain extent, that love and appeal. I think that's where joy and laughter comes from, and I think that's when we're at our best. And we have company meetings which are full of joy and laughter, which is lovely. It's collective energy is what produces that. And then the second question was, what's your
leadership secret?
Listen. Ask and listen. Ask the question. You learn so much when you listen, and if you ask questions at the right time, it's such an invaluable shortcut sometimes. So for me, that's those two things, I think. Am I allowed to?
But also, what's interesting though, when you talk about listen, because so many people go, well, I do listen, but it's actually the acting on it, isn't it? The understanding it, the kind of really reflecting and thinking on it, and going, well, actually, what does that mean? And then what do we do with that?
And carrying that with you as well, and remembering, it's that depth, isn't it? It's that impression of, if listening carefully to the right stuff and pulling out the things that matter, and then applying that onwards. I think that's it.
Brilliant.
Wow, that was good, wasn't it?
Miriam, is there anything else that we haven't talked about that you wanted to share, or was burning in your mind before we started?
No, I don't think so. I think the kind of safe space for disagreement and the opportunity and importance of failing were two things that I really wanted to talk about, because I think, again, as we get in a slightly sometimes more functional and sort of process-driven approach to our lives, having that space to do those things and learning from them is so important. But no, I don't think so. I think we've covered it all off, and I've really enjoyed the conversation. So thank you for having me.
No, it's been
thank
fantastic.
you for being part of it.
Can I just ask you something? Sorry, it just popped in my mind. How do you give, and the reason I'm bringing it up is I know we've mentioned it before. How do you give, when so much is data, and people are, they don't see perhaps the patterns in data or the ideas. They just want to tell me 100% that this is right. Maybe because they're not, I don't know, for whatever reasons. How do you kind of work with people to be braver in the choices that they make?
It's a nice question.
We are constantly pushing for particularly creative bravery as well. And it has been a bit of a concern in recent years. I think that particularly during cost of living and, when times are tougher, people do tend to do something that's a bit safer. And I think, we've definitely lost some pitches with some brilliant ideas. And then we see the output of the winning agency. It's just like, wow, that is not brave. We try and fire up that at any point with, insight, back it up. But I think there's just a huge amount within some of the most successful campaigns that, we can probably name as well, that gut feel does have to come into it. Yes, you provide all the data that supports this, the insight's correct, the audience correct, it all lines up. But actually, do you love this? Like going back to that kind of passion and love, can you fall in love with the idea? Does it resonate? Does it make you think? Does it stay with you? So to a degree, we can support as much as we can, but actually, having an idea or thought, a platform, a positioning that you just can't stop thinking about, that's when you can convince someone to be brave. And that's what we try to get to. And that's some of the best feedback we've had is, it's always the best meeting in my month, or, I can't stop thinking about the thing that you said at that point, or I've returned to this and I just can't leave it. And I know that it's going to cost X more to create on TV, but I just can't leave it alone. It's that falling in love moment with an idea, which is brave, which will change the course of the business. But yeah, science and art are hard to balance, but I think they can work together. But ultimately, you as a human being communicating to other human beings need to feel excited. And if you don't feel it, it's not there.
Yeah. But you see, that's why I think, and I would say that, we're passionate about it, applied neuroscience is so important to this, because it is the human bit. Once people understand how the brain works and what they can do with it and everything that's going on, it adds to creativity and innovation. I mean, 100%, it really, really does. So what I'm hearing you saying, it's about being brave to be human, touching, your instinct, your gut, all those things that people can't put into words or explain, that become the real meaningful pieces of your conversation and the work that you do.
Yeah, absolutely. And having a human response is like, I pitched an idea and the CEO couldn't stay in his seat. He had to stand up, and I was like, we've won. I know we've won now. He's so excited by that idea. He has to stand up. He can't stay seated. And I had a meeting on Monday. It was just like, the hairs on my back have just stood up, from a client. And so to get that, to elicit that human response and also have that relationship where they can share that, as well. Yeah, that's, and that if that's happening for that individual, and it's all rarefied and ratified as well, and you get that actual elicit that human response, then you've got something that's interesting.
I want to be in one of your pitches.
Come along.
But Miriam, thank you so much. It's been lovely to have this conversation. Pleasure. Really enjoyed it. I don't know how we're going to cut it down, to be honest. I think
Leanne's was the same. We did 2 parts. Yeah, exactly. We just said to Crystal, can you do it in 2 parts?
Yeah, I think that's what Crystal might do. And David's is an hour now. Normally we always try and go for about half an hour because of people's attention span and things like that. But we've just had it's just been brilliant. It's been a wonderful conversation with you. It really has.
Oh, likewise.
Really enjoyed it.
So yeah.
We are hoping to try and find a time and a date that will work for everybody that's been part of this particular series, to see if we could, once it's out there, once you've all heard the series, there's a massive assumption that you're going to actually listen to them.
And tell everybody about them. Yeah,
we get you all back and sort of do some reflection with each other on what's sort of come out of it. What's it changed for you, perhaps listening in and, just thinking about, just bringing together those minds and have a chance to chat to all of us at the same time. So if you're up for that, we'll throw a few dates at you when we're ready to do that.
Definitely. No, that sounds really interesting. And I look forward to, of course, listening to at least part 1 of part 2. 1 of 2. But yeah, that sounds good.
Fantastic.
Lovely. We don't need to listen to this one because you know what was said.
Yeah.
So,
But Miriam,
thank
have
you.
have you got a nice day?
I've got a few meetings this afternoon.
Well, that was fabulous, wasn't it?
I really enjoyed that so much. My brain is just churning over as we're sitting here. Yeah,
I know. I had to keep reminding myself that I had to contribute. I do that when I just become so immersed in the conversation.
Well, you do, but it's like, as Miriam was talking about, it's about listening, and we were all truly listening, because what she was saying was just so important to our whole kind of self-care, really.
I think it really underpinned the reasons why we've stuck with creativity and innovation, and why we're building. She kept talking about the word passion, and we are becoming intensely wrapped up in determination to get organizations and individuals ideating, innovating, problem solving, and becoming critical thinkers, because it's lost in our education. That for me just really became so important.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the education piece is really interesting. And I think it's something that I know that we're going to put some attention on a bit later. But also for me, what came out was the whole human bravery and courage, which is so important, and in knowing ourselves and understanding other people. And that's where we are. That's our genius as human beings, and we forget it.
Yeah, I love that. Our genius as human beings. So our next episode is just you and me. So that'll be good. And we are sort of sidestepping from today, looking at human health, if you like, and we'll be moving into our brain health. So we'll be looking at sleep hygiene, things that we can do that are, well, the importance of self-care, really, and looking after our brain. We only have one. So we need to make sure that it's flexing all of its ability.
Yeah. So diet, exercise, sleep, mindfulness, because one of the biggest things for the brain is the connections that it makes via its networks, and that's all down to the melanin and the connectivity about it. And actually, if you don't feed your brain and look after it properly, that just withers away. So people can't make connections.
Yes, I've got a note, rest and digest. So I guess it's sort of allowing the brain time to make sense of everything you've thrown at it through the day.
Yeah. So it's the parasympathetic, and it's the default network that we talk about, and the salience network, and things like that. And the real importance of it, because people don't really, I mean, I know we talk about brain diseases, Alzheimer's and all those terrible things, but just our daily personal brain health and self-care is so important.
Well, that's why we've got a whole episode on it.
Yeah.
So
brilliant.
I hope we get people listening in.
Yeah. No, I think it's been great. I'm having a great time.
We're enjoying these ones, aren't we? We're getting into our groove. Listen in.
Enjoyed this episode? Listen to more at brainycast.com.